So I've been playing a good amount of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite lately, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. I've been trying out some of the new characters like Black Widow and Venom and Monster Hunter, although I did get Monster Hunter a while back, I just hadn't played with her a lot, and I've been having a lot of fun after booting the game back up. The game, unfortunately, is still like a 50 gigabyte download, which is just still ridiculous, but the game's still a lot of fun, and thankfully now, since I have 2 extra terabytes of storage space, I can have the game downloaded no problem, so that's not an issue anymore. But I keep looking at it, and there's this glaring issue. It's not a bug, but this glaring issue that there is with the game right now that I don't feel like is ever going to be fixed or rectified, and that is the fact that Marvel's cast outnumbers Capcom's cast in this game by 2 characters. Marvel has 2 extra characters, and for some reason that bugs me. I felt like it should always be like this sort of even divide, Marvel versus Capcom. It's both brands, it's both franchises in there. So, why is Marvel getting the obvious spotlight here? I mean, I know why. It's because Marvel and the Marvel Cinematic Universe is huge, which brings us into more problems with this game, but I'll get on that later in the video. But still, it just sucks because with the sales numbers the game had, which I believe is below 2 million, which was Capcom's sales goal for the end of the fiscal year. So, man, they definitely didn't hit that goal is all I can say. The game was a financial and critical failure, which sucks because I actually really enjoyed the game, but it has so many issues. With hindsight being 2020, it's easy to see how they could have made this game amazing and how this game probably could have sold millions more copies than it actually did. And that's what the whole point of this video is about today, to present strategies and ideas on how Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite could have sold way better and just been a much better experience overall. So let's get into it. So here is some arcade mode gameplay of mine from Marvel vs. Capcom 3, and as you can see, I'm playing as X-23, Wolverine, and Deadpool. The one big obvious thing that people were saying from the beginning, you don't even need a hindsight to figure this one out. Everybody had the foresight to see that a Marvel vs. Capcom game missing X-Men characters would have been a bad thing. Not to mention the fact that Logan and Deadpool were both these huge critical and financial successes, and not having these 3 characters, Wolverine, X-23, and Deadpool in there in particular, was definitely a mistake. This would have been so marketable for the game. You could have marketed to that 20th Century Fox crowd, the people who like X-Men. It was such an obvious thing that the game should have had. They were such obvious characters that should have been included that it's just hard to look at the game without them. It's like, wow, you guys seriously thought it would be a good idea releasing this game after the popularity of Logan and Deadpool and the success of those 2 films and the increased popularity of those characters. You actually thought it was a good idea to exclude them from the game entirely. I know you guys wanted to make the Marvel Cinematic Universe the focus here, but that's the beauty of working under Disney and working on a video game where you don't have to really worry about licensing issues. You can have a Marvel Cinematic feel to it. You can have your Marvel Cinematic characters in there, universe characters in there, and still have X-Men too. Man, what a selling point. But they didn't include these characters for whatever reason, which is kind of ridiculous, kind of stupid. It would have been this big thing for the game, too. It would have been so marketable to those crowds, but for whatever reason, they didn't do it. And, man, what a mistake. That's all I can say. Now, let me know this. Did you guys play the Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite story mode? I did, and quite honestly, I rather enjoyed it. I especially enjoyed the fact that Dante was essentially the hero of the day at the end of the game, which made me really happy. It could have been any of my favorite characters like Spider-Man or Chris Redfield or Dante that were in it that did it, but the fact that it was Dante was a nice touch. The fact that it was kind of a ripoff to one of his speeches in Devil May Cry 4 is hilarious. He has a speech at the end of Devil May Cry 4 where he's talking to that scientist dude about his humanity and what it means to be human and the strength of humanity, which even though it's not a one-to-one for dialogue, it's not the exact same things he's saying, but it was done in the exact same way. I honestly kind of like that a lot, and I found it very funny when while I've been replaying Devil May Cry 4 recently. But the big thing here is the fact that one of the problems with the story mode was there wasn't enough villains, there wasn't enough characters in general. Now, this isn't the roster section of the video. Trust me, we'll get there. We'll talk about the roster, but for now, I'm just talking about how more characters could have improved the story mode. We could have had more worthwhile fights, and I touched on this back in my review, but honestly, it doesn't make any sense to me that we had Chris Redfield in this game, but we didn't have Wesker, even though they have more of a rivalry going on due to Resident Evil 5. And considering how Chris was voiced by Roger Craig Smith and was wearing his Resident Evil 5 getup, it makes even less sense. And it would have been nice to have Wesker there, not only to play off of Chris, but to play off of other characters as well, for the sake of the story. But unfortunately, we had Nemesis instead, which I like Nemesis. He doesn't really contribute much to the story other than being just some monster to fight. On top of that, we could have had Jill there, and seeing Jill and Chris have the same goals and motivations and sharing screen time again inside the game would have been amazing. Seeing that partnership come alive again, and since the game reduced its method from 3v3 to 2v2, there could have been a Jill and Chris team up versus Wesker and Nemesis that had real story implications, and it would have been great. And Resident Evil is not the only franchise that could have helped out in this regard. There's so much more. We could have had Nero. Why didn't we have Nero? We could have had villains like Magneto to help out Jedha, or to help out Thanos, or to help out Ultron Sigma, to side with somebody. Probably side with Ultron Sigma because, you know, story-wise, if Magneto wasn't on Ultron Sigma's side, then Magneto would be pretty OP against him with his ability to control metal. But regardless, we needed a whole lot more villains and heroes in there to really not only flesh out the story, but also to flesh out the fights. Because as you know, if you played the story mode, a lot of fights boiled down to these really basic, really boring Ultron drone fights, which just weren't exciting and didn't have any thematic weight. There was a couple times it was utilized pretty well, and you know, occasionally you could get that sense of like, holy crap, fighting several enemies on screen at once. There's like 2 or 3 Ultron drone screens, and it feels like I'm being ganged up on, which sometimes you are being ganged up on, and it's annoying. But other times it's also like, that's pretty cool. You know, it's like a horde mode kind of in a fighting game, and it's interesting. But still, the story mode could have definitely benefited from a beefier roster, not to mention the roster in general. So now we're going to move on to the roster section. Yeah, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is pretty infamous for having this crazy huge roster with this amazing diverse cast of characters. Like, holy shit. But that being the 2D fighting game age, where games were a lot less expensive to produce, not to mention the fact that a lot of those sprites had existed in previous games like Street Fighter Alpha and stuff, if I'm not mistaken. It's really one of those things where in the modern age of gaming, you couldn't expect the roster to be that crazy. But when you have so many characters and assets that you could have used for story mode built into Marvel vs. Capcom 3, which there are a few characters that they almost feels like they just copied and pasted over to Marvel Infinite, Chris Redfield being one of them, why didn't we have the entire cast of Marvel vs. Capcom 3 with a few of the new additions that we had like Jedha, Captain Marvel, and Gamora? It really doesn't make any sense, and this is the biggest issue with Marvel Infinite to date. And quite honestly, it's just stupid that we have such a stagnated roster compared to just about every previous game in the franchise. Oh well, whatever. So if you're interested in a video about Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, I think it's reasonable to assume that you've seen Avengers Infinity War by now, which I'm not going to spoil the movie. So if you're worried about that, don't worry. I'm not going to spoil the movie. But still, it's clear from the get-go that with the whole infectious computer virus thing and Ultron teaming up with Sigma, both being robots and whatnot, they were trying to tailcoat off of the success of Avengers Age of Ultron. That clearly was the wrong move, because with the use of the Infinity Stones, this would have been your opportunity to A, push the game's development back a year to where Infinity Stone was just around the corner, or Infinity War, sorry, and B, have Thanos be more the center of attention here. Now, in a way, Thanos kind of was the main villain of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, but he wasn't, like, the big bad to take down. That was Ultron Sigma, or, you know, since Marvel had more favor in this regard, Ultron Omega at the very end, and Sigma's name isn't even a part of it anymore, although his face is pretty much 90% of the character's body, which is hilarious. But still, it just goes to show that the success of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite could have pulled heavily from Avengers Infinity War and the popularity and success of that movie. And pushing the game back to coincide with the release date of that movie not only would have helped market the game because, you know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe and Thanos and Infinity Stones would have been huge at that moment in time, but at the same time, they would have had an extra year of development to polish the game's graphics and its story and its overall general experience and to develop all those characters. This really comes down to the fact that there just should have been more money put into this game than there actually was. It's really upsetting. It's really upsetting because this seems like such an awesome strategy. You know, pairing it up with one of the biggest movie releases in film history and having the game kind of ride off of that film's success because you know it would have. But instead, it came out like a year prior to that movie releasing in theaters while not focusing on the aspects that that movie focused on entirely. It had hints of Thanos and the Infinity Stones and whatnot, but for the most part, it ended up being a lackluster experience because the development was stagnated probably by a lack of time and funds, and the promotional materials for the movie could have helped the game, and the game didn't really have good promotion in a sense because of that. Yes, it was showed off at E3, they gave it trailers, blah, 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 but still, that would have been some, like, legendary crossover shit. There's just so much here that could have helped the game. You know, extra polish, extra time, extra money, more characters, better story. Those are all obvious things, but the way to do them might not have been as obvious to Capcom. But looking at it now, it's so easy to see how they could have made this experience not only amazing for the gamers, but could have made it in a way where it would have made them a shit ton of money. Oh, man. At the end of the day, I really liked Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite, and this might be one of the last videos I ever make about it, but I just want people to know that. And I want people to know that I'm only presenting these ideas of how it could have succeeded because I really wanted it to. And knowing the possibilities and thinking about these possibilities honestly saddened me. But perhaps Capcom's going to learn from their mistake. I don't know. Normally, their franchises tend to get shelved after they stop selling, but I don't think this is going to be the case with this one. The Marvel property is just too huge. The Capcom Versus series has such a long and storied history. I don't know. I just hope they give it another shot. If it fails a second time, maybe then is time to put up the cape and cowl. But for now, let's just wait and see what they do. Let's wait and see.